Maria De Luca was 16 when she immigrated to this country from Italy. By age 18, she was a patient in Weston State Mental Hospital in West Virginia. It was there that I met Mary some 70 years later. Her initial diagnosis was obsessive compulsive disorder, a disorder that many people these days function quite well in public without being institutionalized. I can't help but think that Mary's real diagnosis was simply that she was a foreigner. Whatever the reason, Mary spent her entire adult life in Weston. And in the year following our time together, she would die there. Mary and I quickly became friends. We had a ritual. Every morning I would enter the ward, she would be waiting for me with an empty chair beside her. She would pat the chair, I would sit down, she would take my hand, and we would sit for 10 or 15 minutes. Some days we'd have wonderful conversations, other days we'd sit in silence. When she had determined it was long enough, she would squeeze my hand and send me off to work. At the end of the day, I could count on Mary being by the door with the empty chair waiting. She would pat it, I would sit down. She would take my hand and we would sit. And when it was time for me to go, she would lean over and she would kiss me on the cheek and wish me a good night as I returned to my apartment. It was during one of these times that Lil, the social worker, happened to be wandering by and playfully asked Mary who her boyfriend was. Mary's response was, "Angelo." Lil looked at me and I was as confused as Lil. And she turned to Mary and she says, No, Mary, you're mixed up. That's Jakey, not Angelo. Mary's response was a quite indignant, "Yes, Angelo." At first I thought maybe she had confused me with a relative. But the longer the conversation went on, the more angry Mary got. In fact, I'd never seen her quite that angry. And then finally I had a moment of insight. And I stopped the raging battle between the two of them and said, "Mary." And I pointed at Lil and I said, "Who is this?" And she looked at me and she said, "Angelica." And I smiled. "I got it, Lil. We are Mary's angels." And with that, Mary beamed and shook her head vigorously up and down. "Yes, Angelo, Angelica." In the midst of her desolation, Mary had found angels to give her hope and comfort. The Bible is full of those kinds of stories of God's angels, his messengers, bringing news of hope and grace. We read about them in the Old Testament as well as the New. In the New Testament, they come to Mary and Joseph with the good news of a pending birth. And then we find them on Christmas Eve, bringing that same news to the whole world in joyous song. In the book of Hebrews, we are cautioned to pay attention to our hospitality, because many have entertained angels without knowing it. How many angels we have seen in these days. We have heard their stories on the evening news. They have crossed our internets with their stories of hope, of service. They come in all genders, all ages, all colors, bringing good news of hope and love and service. We see them in our hospitals. We see them in our homes. How many children have stepped up and become leaders of relief for those in particular need? We have seen them in parents who have become teachers for their children. We have seen them in neighbors reaching out, bringing food in the midst of times of trouble and trial. We have seen them in our grocery stores. We see them on our farms. We see them drive the big rigs, bringing much needed supplies and food. We see them in our restaurants. How many restaurateurs are quietly, without the public knowing, feeding the hungry. We see them unloading supplies for food kitchens. We see them distributing boxes of food. The angels are all around us these days. Obvious and not so obvious. As we begin to look around us, where are the angels in our lives? And how has God been using us as messengers of hope and grace to those around us? Who are the angels holding our hands, particularly in these times of our need? What angels have we shown hospitality to, completely unawares? Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call, hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When the darkness appears and the night draws near, and the day is almost gone, at the river I stand, guide my feet, hold my hand. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Dear Lord, in the midst of these days, send your angels to hold our hands, that we may know that we are not alone, that we are in your home. Amen.